What's the worst I hate to break it to you moment you had with someone? I had to tell my friend that the online girlfriend had been talking to for months was actually a scammer using stolen photos. He was planning to send her money to come visit, and breaking the news to him was one of the toughest conversations I've ever had. My best friend in high school was overweight and would sweat profusely. We would come in after lunch in Texas and he would smell awful. I think he would wear his clothes without washing them after sweating. We had English after and the AC sucked, so teacher put a fan in the window. He would sit in front of the fan and blow his funk over everyone. The class got together and voted that I should be the one to tell him. Well, I had to break it to him that for the last year he has smelled horribly. I felt pretty bad, but he never stunk again. I came back from my first day of finals in my first semester of college to find 2 women in suits and a campus police officer waiting for me. The women were mental health counselors from the university. One of them tried to talk to me but started crying, the other one couldn't say anything either. It was finally the cop who told me that someone had broken into my mother's house that morning and murdered her, my mom. Not me, but I went to visit my dad at his job, and he has an employee there who was kind of bragging to his other co-workers about how well he has been doing at the job and thinking of asking for promotion. My dad later told me that he fired that guy later that day due to poor performance despite multiple attempts to help him lol. Oof, definitely the time I had to tell a friend that the business opportunity he was so excited about was actually a pyramid scheme. He was so hyped, talking about how he was going to quit his job and be his own boss. I tried to ease into it, but there's really no soft way to say, hey man, you're about to lose a lot of money and ruin your friendships. My sister-in-law. My niece plays field hockey and I love her. She plays in 2 different leagues, meaning it's 3 hours of field hockey games every Saturday and Sunday. My SL expected me and my husband to drive an hour one way both days to watch niece play and pay rapt attention the whole time. Did I mention the games are at 7 a.m.? We did this about once a month on either Saturday or Sunday, and I guess this wasn't enough for her. We had to tell her that we loved niece, but we weren't going to be as involved as she was in the league. When I got the call that my mom had passed, they wouldn't say that she had passed, or that she had died. They kept saying medical things like, she doesn't have a pulse, she is not breathing, etc. It took a long time to understand that they were saying she was gone, and that it was final. There was a rule at my job where only one of these 2 supervisors could be off at a time. One of them loved to take a full week off work during holidays, to get more bang for his toe buck. One year, he had Thanksgiving week off, but the other supervisor had family come to town that week on late notice. The other supervisor asked him to cancel just one of his days so she could spend the day with family. He declined, even after she basically begged him. And he even said he didn't have anything to do that day. She then proceeded to take toe days every Wednesday of a holiday week for the next calendar year, effectively blocking him from taking his cheap weeks off. He told me that he thought it was funny because he knew she didn't have enough time to take all those vacation days off, and she'd eventually have to cancel some of them. I got to tell him, I hate to break it to you, but she only took 2 hours off each of those days. See, the rule didn't differentiate between a partial or whole day, so she only had to burn 24 or so hours to block him. He looked devastated. It was kind of petty on both of their parts, but I give her credit for being creative in her retribution. Freshman year of college, a friend said that he was going to go barefoot as much as possible to toughen up his feet so that his future kids would be born with tough feet too. Had to explain to him why that wouldn't work and the basics of genetics. He didn't believe me and stuck with his theory. We have since lost touch, but I know he had a son a few years ago. I'll have to ask him if it worked out. I had an upper management type guy try to explain to me, in a very condescending way, how a specific device works and how to install it. All completely wrong. I wrote the manual for it on the patent, it's named after me. Had a friend ask me about some green sign in the distance. It was in fact a sodium vapor sign giving off an intense orange light, which sodium vapor is known for. Had to tell him right there that he was colorblind. He was in his mid-30s too. A lot of odd things that had happened in his past fell into place for him that day. My sister and her husband had a newborn baby, 4 days old. My sister's husband turned to me and said, "Hell sleeps soon, right?" A friend of mine told me that gay men are born with vaginas, buttholes and penises. When I said no, they aren't, he said, then how do gay men have sex? We were in high school, and this was back in the late 2000s. Not exactly young, and his brain struggled to comprehend anal sex. He truly didn't believe it at first that people have sex that way. My dad has been a musician since the 70s. He's incredibly talented, can play multiple instruments, and has written many songs that honestly would sound at home on the radio. About a year or so ago, some scam artists told him they loved his work and wanted to represent him and get his music out there to make money. They just needed a small upfront fee. My poor dad was so happy too. He had wanted this for literal decades. I think that's what clouded his judgment at the time. And yeah, the moment he told me, loud alarms went off in my head. I researched these people online and found an ocean of comments saying they all got scammed. I wanted my dad to be happy, but I couldn't let him be scammed, so I told him. He accepted it, kind of brushed it off, but it was that, yeah, I should've known this would happen kind of response. Really depressing to see him so happy, just to be let down. I know to you and me this would have been an obvious scam, but my dad is from a different time and has no idea about computers or online culture. Fuck scammers. I used to work in a customer care call center for a major telecommunications company. A woman called in one day to inquire about $2.99 charges on her bill from Lava Life. She kept pressing about the charges, what they were, and I had to explain to her that Lava Life is a dating service and that the charges were legitimate. If she didn't make them, did someone else live in her house who might have? There was only her husband, and I heard her go from "but he would never, I have to go now," as it said in dot that was almost 20 years ago now, and I still feel awful about it dot. I have two. The first one was having to tell my father and my brother's girlfriend that my brother had been in a bad automobile accident, that my cousin who had been with him was dead, and my brother was in a coma in a hospital 3 hours away. The second one was when I had to tell my mother that my sister was sleeping with my mother's boyfriend. That was a tough one. And yes, I was 100% sure because they did it in front of me. Having to tell a student who was almost totally blind that she likely couldn't be an ER nurse. She and her dad moved to our district, and at the IEP, her dad starts talking about how he can't wait for Sue to go to nursing school. I frantically scanned my brain, trying to think of how someone who was going to need Braille would be able to do that job. Then Sue piped up to say that her dream was to be an ER nurse. Her prior district told her she could do anything, including this. She had a degenerative disease that would eventually make her blind. I talked to my friends who were nurses, I talked to our career lady at the school, I researched, but there just wasn't any way someone who couldn't see could be an ER nurse. I reconvened the IEP and had to explain this. I know both were in denial, but I was not happy that the prior district pumped up this idea. I mean, sure, there is lots she could still do, but that just wasn't one of them. Then another student came from the same district with the idea she could be a CSI investigator. She was also nearly blind. My ex-wife tried to commit suicide twice in 1 week. The second time, she was committed to a psych ward. Her mother decided to come over and help with the kids and household chores. The second day she is at the house, she comes out of the bedroom disoriented. Turns out she is having a stroke. For the third time that week, I had to call 911. I had to go to the psych ward and tell my suicidal, drugged-up wife that her mother, who she was very close to, was in the hospital because she had a stroke. My primary care doctor, who told me I have anxiety and exaggerate my health symptoms, when I got to tell her I saw an endocrinologist on my own. Luckily with my insurance I didn't require a referral and was diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder.